Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopira Vallabha Giridharadhari. Jaya Gopira Vallabha Giridharadhari. Asurana Bhadrana Yamuna Thera Yamuna Thera Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopina Vallabha Giridharadhari. Jaya
glories to Shiva and Shri Gauranga. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 2, Text number 20. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tathaiva chanye naralokavira Yahave Krishnam Mukharavindam Nechapibento Naraida Bimam Patascha Puta Paramapasha Tathaiva chanye naralokavira Yahave Krishna Mukharavindam Nechapibinto Narayana Birmam Patascha Pita Param Apasha Tathaiva chanye naralokavira Yahave Krishna Mukharavindam Netrapibento Narayana Birmam Patascha Puta Paramapasha Tata, as also Evacha, and certainly Anya, others, Naraloka, human society, Viraha, fighters, those, Ahave, on the battlefield of Kuru, etc. Krishna, Lord Krishna's, Mukha Aravindam, face like a lotus flower, Netrahe, with the eyes, Pibantaha, while seeing, Narayana Abiramam, very pleasing to the eyes, Prata Arjuna, Astraputa, purified by arrows, Padam, abode, Apuhu, achieved, Asha, of him. Translation, Translation, certainly others who were fighters on the battlefield of Kuru, etc., were purified by the onslaught of Arjuna's arrows, and while seeing the lotus face of Krishna, so pleasing to the eyes, they achieved the abode of the Lord. Purport. Supreme Personality Godhead Lord Krishna appears in this world for two missionary purposes: to deliver the faithful and to annihilate the miscreants. But because the Lord is absolute, his two different kinds of actions, although apparently different, are ultimately one and the same. His annihilation of a person like Shishupal is as auspicious as his actions for the protection of the faithful. All the warriors who fought against Arjuna, but who were able to see the lotus face of the Lord on the battlefront, achieved the abode of the Lord exactly as the devotees of the Lord do. The words pleasing to the eyes of the seer are very significant. When the warriors from the other side of the battlefield saw Lord Krishna at the front, they appreciated his beauty, and their dormant instinct of love of God was awakened. Shishupal saw the Lord also, but he saw him as his enemy, and his love was not awakened. Therefore, Shishupal achieved oneness with the Lord by merging in the impersonal glare of his body, called the Brahmajyoti. Others who were in the marginal position, being neither friends nor enemies, but slightly in love of Godhead by appreciating the beauty of his face, were at once promoted to the spiritual planets, the Vaikunthas. The Lord's personal abode is called Goloka Vrindavan, and the abodes where his plenary expansions reside are called the Vaikunthas, where the Lord is present as Narayan. Love of Godhead is dormant in every living entity, and the entire process of devotional service unto the Lord is meant for awakening this dormant eternal love of Godhead. But there are degrees of such transcendental awakening. Those whose love of God is awakened to the fullest extent go back to the Goloka Vrindavan planet in the spiritual sky, whereas persons who have just awakened to love of Godhead by accident or association or are transferred to the Vaikuntha planets. Essentially, there is no material difference between Goloka and Vaikuntha, but in the Vaikunthas the Lord is served in unlimited opulence, whereas in Goloka the Lord is served in natural affection. This love of God is awakened by the association of pure devotees of the Lord. Here the word Padashtraputaha is significant. Those who saw the beautiful face of the Lord on the battlefield of Kurukshetra were purified first by Arjuna when he made his onslaught with arrows. The Lord appeared for the mission of diminishing the burden of the world, and Arjuna was assisting the Lord by fighting on his behalf. Arjuna personally declined to fight, and the whole instruction of the Bhagavad Gita was given to Arjuna to engage him in the fight. As a pure devotee of the Lord, Arjuna agreed to fight in preference to his own decision, and thus Arjuna fought to assist the Lord in his mission of diminishing the burden of the world. All the activities of a pure devotee are executed on behalf of the Lord, because a pure devotee of the Lord has nothing to do for his personal interest. Arjuna's killing was as good as killing by the Lord himself. As soon as Arjuna shot an arrow at an enemy, that enemy became purified of all material contaminations and became eligible to be transferred to the spiritual sky. Those warriors who appreciated the lotus feet of the Lord and saw his face at the front had the dormant love of God awakened. Thus they were transferred at once to Vaikuntha Loka, not to the impersonal state of Brahmajyoti, as was Shishupal. Shishupal died without appreciating the Lord, while others died with appreciation of the Lord. Both were transferred to the spiritual sky, but those who awakened to love of God were transferred to the planets of the transcendental sky. Uddhava seemingly lamented that his own position was less than that of the warriors on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, because they had attained to Vaikuntha, whereas he remained to lament the disappearance of the Lord. So Uddhava continues speaking to Vidura. So this chapter, remembrance of the Lord. So many so many of these verses, Uddhava is just remembering so many different personalities and in their relationship to Krishna. And he's analysing that according to one's consciousness and one's mentality and one's sort of spiritual position, everybody relates to Krishna in a different way, and ultimately their destination is going to be different. You know, you have the story, the idea that all rivers flow to the sea, or all trains go to Central. Not necessarily. It's according to one's goal and one's desire and one's practice. There's a particular destination. Like Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that according to who one worships, if you worship the Devas, you go to the planet of the Devas. You worship the ancestors, you go to them at the end of life. You worship, and ultimately he says, if you worship me, you come to me. So it's not that automatically one will ultimately go to the highest destination, whether one's desiring or practicing it or not. But here, particularly on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, the warriors there, because Krishna was personally present, because they were appreciating Krishna's beauty, even if it was in just very mildly, just appreciating the beauty of Krishna, then their dormant love of Krishna, which is in everybody's heart, even Shishupal, every living entity has that dormant love of Krishna. We all have our original loving relationship with Krishna. But on the battlefield, that dormant love of Godhead was just awakened, just marginally. But that was enough for Krishna to award them liberation back to the Vaikuntha planets. So what to speak of that person who is putting so much time and effort into worshipping Krishna? Ultimately, they get back to the topmost planet, Krishna's own planet, Goloka Vrindavan, because they have practiced that devotional service. So devotional service basically means, at least in the beginning, remembering Krishna, how all our whole basically daily practice from early morning till we take rest is all about trying to remember Krishna, remembering his form, remembering his name, remembering his pastimes, his associates, etc., etc. So ultimately, when it's our time to ultimately give up our body, that remembrance will come very easily. But we see here that those warriors, even on the opposing side of Krishna, they were awarded liberation to the spiritual realm just because they had some, mild sort of appreciation for Krishna. Of course, Krishna, the battle of Kurukshetra was ultimately Krishna's plan, in that he wanted because he's responding to, the earth personified Bhumi came to Lord Brahma and presented her situation with tears in her eyes, that the whole world is overburdened with military activities and demoniac persons in the guise of kings. So she wanted the burden of the earth to relieve in that way. So Krishna reciprocated with that, and ultimately the whole battle of Kurukshetra was arranged to relieve the burden of the earth in that way. So, of course, we know he gave the promise that he wouldn't directly participate in the war, but at the same time he empowered so many other warriors. So particularly Arjuna, he agreed to be the chariot driver of Arjuna. And so Arjuna was his representative in that sense, that, he had the devotee on the street distributing books on behalf of Krishna. So Arjuna was on the battlefield distributing arrows on behalf of Krishna. But ultimately it was the same purpose, is to liberate, to purify and liberate, like Prabhupada says, that first the warriors were purified by Arjuna's arrows, and then by appreciating Krishna's beauty, when they gave up their body, they were awarded passage back to the spiritual realm. So this is the duty and the purpose and the responsibility of all representatives of Krishna. It's like the spiritual master, he is the, and now we can say she, there is a Mataji spiritual master now, hopefully there'll be more, but so he or she will be, is the external representative of Krishna. So, some people say, well, where is this God you're talking about, And so he appears in so many different ways. I mean, like we know 5,000 years ago, he appeared personally. He also in the heart of every living entity. Through his arrangement, he manifests revealed scripture, Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, etc. He manifests, empowers the jivas as spiritual masters. It also empowers every individual devotee who's trying to present Krishna's message in so many different ways. So we can't be thinking that where is Krishna, what does he do for us? In so many ways he's trying to encourage us, but he reciprocates with our desires at the same time. If we want to remain eternally in this material world, he's not going to get in the way. It's not that it's pleasing to him, but if that's our desire, we become nitya buddhas, like eternally conditioned. But for those fortunate souls, they, if they want to come back to the spiritual world, to associate with Krishna directly, then Krishna is so happy to reciprocate. So, Uddhava, he's this is his remembrance that even the warriors, even though they weren't practicing devotional service, still they ultimately received the greatest benediction from Krishna. So he mentions that Shishupal was a demoniac mentality, and he wasn't able to appreciate Krishna's position, but still he was liberated in the sense that he emerged into the Brahmajyoti, the effulgence of Krishna. So even though he was benefited. So, and also we know, Kamsa, Ravana, so many different demoniac personalities that are personally killed by Krishna. So the point is, Uddhava was making that, and Prabhupada in the purport, that whether one is killed by Krishna or one delivered by Krishna, ultimately is the same. It's the same destination. Some people hearing about there's so much killing, and I remember one in New Govardhana, a farm near Sydney, and the young children, the Gurukul kids, they were putting on a play. I think it was either Janmashtami, it was on festival, and there were some visitors there, and they were sort of quite disturbed that these children were putting on a drama about Krishna killing people, and said, this is a bit, too much. You're teaching kids about this and that. So we explained that, from Krishna's point of view, it's the same. If you're killed by Krishna or liberated by Krishna, the destination is basically the same. When I was in Perth, it was years ago, there was like a New Age festival sort of thing every year, a conscious living festival. We used to go there and distribute prasad. And there was one Indian man, he was talking to me, and he said his family was Hindu, but he became Christian. He said he became Christian because Jesus never killed anybody. Krishna, he's always killing people. So I think Jesus is more, worthy of my worship because he never killed anybody. So, and I said, okay, that's a reasonable point. So Krishna is killing people. What's their destination? What happens to them? And he couldn't tell me. So that's, it's a bit sort of sentimental. And I said, also, Lord Chaitanya, he's Krishna himself, but he appeared as a devotee. He didn't kill anybody, but what he did was kill the demoniac propensity within the heart of everybody. So, so anyway, that was just interesting. He made that point. But, proper knowledge, we understand Krishna is absolute. Whether one is delivered by Krishna, if one is delivered by Krishna, he goes back to the spiritual world. If one is killed by Krishna, they ultimately get the same destination. So it's not an ordinary person who has the opportunity to be killed by Krishna personally. That's his special benediction. So So Prabhupada mentions in the purport that the two primary activities when Krishna personally comes to the spirit, to the material world, is we learn from 4.8 Bhagavad Gita, Parichana Sadanam Vinashaya Duskritam Dhammasam Stapanataya Sambhavami Juge Juge, that to deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants and to re-establish principles of religion. I myself appear millennium after millennium. So these are the two primary activities. Of course, the Acharyas point out that Krishna doesn't have to come to kill the miscreants or the demoniac. He has so many agencies to do that. It's like the, in a country like the Prime Minister doesn't have to deal with the miscreants in society. His agents, the police force, are doing that. The real reason Krishna comes is to deliver the pious, to give pleasure to the devotees. So sometimes you see the Prime Minister when, say, perhaps somebody has performed some heroic act, they saved, children from a burning house or something, they've been awarded with a bravery medal, so the Prime Minister himself comes out, and personally gives the medal in appreciation like that. So the main point is that Krishna, he personally comes and he performs his so many multifarious activities, which to that person who has developed some appreciation, love for Krishna, these activities are so attractive. And this is the deliverance, this is the process of deliverance, that we become attracted to Krishna and his different expansions through his very attractive activities, and in this way we develop more and more appreciation, ultimately love for Krishna. But for the devotee, whether he delivers the pious or annihilates the miscreants, it's the same. We get pleasure out of the devotees being liberated, but we get pleasure out of hearing how, Aghasura and the different demons, it's exciting. The young cowherd boys, they are completely fearless in Krishna's presence. And they see this big open mouth and they're thinking, what is it? Anyway, without fear, they just walk straight into the snake's mouth. And Krishna, he's amazed himself how his energy is acting on his devotees, that they have no fear. Anyway, Krishna, he makes, makes the arrangements so Aghasura, the snake demon, gives up the body, and the cowherd boys, they just walk out again. So that was fun. What other game can we play, Krishna? So it's just fun and games for Krishna and his devotees, or for his devotees. It's just fun and games in so many different ways. Of course, it can't be compared to modern day battlefields where there's just wholesale slaughter, and even the non-combatants are considered targets, like the women and children and the non-military people are killed like that. There was some years ago, I saw there was a newspaper report in Malaysia, I think, and some person was presenting that Krishna is immoral because he was inducing Arjuna to go to war. So that was basically the essence of it. Because it's a strong Muslim presence there, so they're thinking that, who is this Krishna? He's trying to create wars. But, the higher understanding is if Krishna is present and anybody dies and is present, they ultimately go back home, back to the spiritual world. And, it was the battlefield of Kurukshetra was arranged ultimately by Krishna because the Kauravas, headed by Dhritarashtra and his son Duryodhana, they weren't the proper emperors or the proper rulers, and because they were impious, they weren't actually fit to rule in a saintly kingdom. So even though it may be mentioned that Duryodhana, he was an efficient ruler, it's more like a Suravan ashram, that the administration was going on, but Krishna wasn't in the centre. So ultimately Krishna, he wanted the rightful heir, Yudhisthira, to be on the throne, and because Yudhisthira and his brothers, the Pandavas, they were great devotees of Krishna, he wanted a pious rule, because if you have impious or atheistic rulers, that's going to influence the whole society, the whole culture. It's understood that the executive head of the country is meant to be God's representative in this material world, and they should be ruling according to religious principles. But when this is not happening, then the general populace, they follow the example of the leaders, of the influential people. So if the rulers are atheistic, then that's not setting a good example for the the general populace. Everybody's on a spectrum. One end of the spectrum is the atheist, and the other spectrum is the theist. But the majority of population are just agnostic. They're in the middle of the spectrum. They're somewhere. So of course, agnostic comes from the Latin agnosis, which comes from the Sanskrit agnaya, meaning without knowledge or not knowing. So the agnostic, for some, they don't know and they're trying to find out, and others don't know and don't care, and there's everybody else in the middle there somewhere. But so it behooves the leaders of society to try to give religious principles and religious guidance to the general society. Otherwise, it's the blind leading the blind, and the end result, everybody falls into the ditch. So ultimately all these different pastimes are there for Krishna to try to attract the conditioned souls. His pleasing words and pleasing activities and his exciting pastimes, it all attracts the living entities. So ultimately they try to develop their dormant love of Krishna. And we see other examples like this point that Arjuna was representing Krishna by sending out his arrows. The spiritual master is representing Krishna by giving guidance to his disciples, or her disciples. And we have like Kaliya, the Kaliya serpent, for instance. He is a very, dark-hearted, black-hearted demon in the form of serpent, multi-headed serpent, residing in the Jamuna River. And because he was so poisonous, any other living entity that come close to him would die. Even the birds flying over the lake, the vapours were so bad that the birds would die, fall into the river like that. So Krishna ultimately, he wanted to, take some action, do something about that. So, we know the story. Ultimately, Krishna, he's dancing on the heads of the serpents, and by in contact with Krishna's lotus feet, his poison heart, on one sense, is being purified, but at the same time, by being constantly pounded by Krishna's feet, he was coming close to death. But ultimately, he was saved by his wives, the Nagapatnis, and they were actually devotees of Krishna, and they offered so many nice prayers. Yes, we understand our husband Kaliya, he's not a very nice person, so many different prayers, but ultimately he is our husband, and please protect him and save him, like that. So through the via medium of his wives, Kaliya was ultimately, saved from Krishna's wrath. And he had another example, the Yajnik Brahmanas. They were performing these Yajnik rituals in the Vrindavan area. Krishna and Balaram and their friends were close by, and Krishna and Balaram, they were, feeling a little bit hungry, and sent some of their friends to the Brahmanas. So you've offered all this prasad, Krishna and Balaram are there, please can we have something to eat? But the Brahmanas, they didn't even respond, very proud of their position. Big Brahmanas chanting all these mantras and so many different, fire yagnas, etc. Didn't even respond. So then these boys went to the wives of the Yajnik Brahmanas, and even though the wives had never seen Krishna, they had heard so much about him within the heart, they had developed love for Krishna. So immediately when they heard that Krishna was close by and he wanted to eat, he gathered up all the foodstuffs and came to Krishna. So afterwards, the Yajnik Brahmanas, they cursed their own position, so proud of their so-called, Brahminical position, but they couldn't recognise that ultimately every yajna is meant for Krishna. But their wives, who, just simple cowherd girls, they, immediately they were able to drop everything, ready to drop everything and give to, take those foodstuffs to Krishna. So that the Brahmanas, in that sense, were delivered in a sense by their wives, because the wives had softer, sentiment towards Krishna. So many different examples you can give. So whether Krishna is killing or delivering, ultimately it's the same. So Krishna, he never does anything bad. Everything is auspicious with Krishna's actions, even if it doesn't appear directly, or we can't quite understand how this is going on. Ultimately, everything Krishna is doing is for our benefit. So you can use the example, Krishna's one of Krishna's name, Bhavagrahi Janardana, meaning that Krishna only sees the devotional essence of our activities. He doesn't see anything else, just our devotional activities. So use the example, if there's bad intention but good action, Krishna only sees the good action. He overlooks the bad intention. So the example he uses like Putana. What was Putana's intention? To kill Krishna. But how was she doing it? She was offering her breast milk to Krishna, like a mother or a nurse. So he only saw that. He just saw the good action. So ultimately Putana was awarded the position of like a mother or a nurse in the spiritual realm. So he completely overlooked, she's trying to kill me, but no, she's offering her breast milk like a mother. So if the intention is good, but the action is bad, Krishna only sees the intention. He overlooks the bad action. So example you can use is like Vidura's wife, Sulabha. Sulabha, yeah. So Krishna came to see Vidura and his wife, and they were in complete ecstasy, and his wife, Sulabha, she was just in her ecstasy. She wanted to offer something to Krishna, so she was peeling the banana, throwing the banana away and offering the skin. But Krishna was eating that skin and thought it was delicious because it was imbued in her love. So normally you don't offer fruit skin, but banana skin to Krishna. So in one sense the action was bad, but the intention was good because it was done out of love. So he just saw the intention. But what happens if the intention is bad and the action is bad? What happens then? If you pray to Krishna for forgiveness, Krishna will forgive you. And the example is Jagai and Madai. So everything they were doing was bad. The intention was bad, the action was bad. And even they got to the point of throwing a pot at Nityananda and caused the blood to come. So Lord Chaitanya, he was ready to kill both of them. But then they surrendered to Lord Chaitanya, so therefore he forgave them. So there's always hope. Always hope. So Krishna, he only sees the devotional essence. So everybody has that devotional essence in some sort of dormant form within the heart. So if through, like Prabhupada says, through action, what does he say? Through action or arrangement. I think the word he uses, action or arrangement. If one develops that dormant love of God, develops through faith, then ultimately one is in a very auspicious position, because their journey back to Krishna's lotus feet has begun. So regardless what position we're in, if there's some sort of, even minute essence of affection or love for Krishna, then Krishna will notice that. He'll disregard everything else. So Krishna is so kind in that way. So we'll just end there. Thank you very much. If there's any questions or comments, yes. Have a microphone.
Like, my understanding, the biggest offense is when you basically offend the devotees of Krishna, right? Isn't it actually by the mercy of Lord Nityananda that he forgave the devotees, not by their prayers, but it's like Nityananda that actually gave the mercy, and through the mercy of Nityananda, Lord Chaitanya gave the mercy?
Yeah, that's correct. But Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, practically there's no difference. They're both Supreme Personality. But the point is that, and ultimately, Lord Chaitanya, he embraced both of them. And his golden body turned black in the sense that he absorbed all those sinful activities. So, but the point is that Lord Chaitanya, he forgave them because they surrendered to Lord Nityananda, There was some remorse there and rectification of their offences in that.
And the other thing, because we're giving that example with Putin, right? The intention and the action, how the action is bad and the intention is good, but I find it hard to understand because, for me, I would say, her intention is bad because she actually, with the poison of her breast milk, wanted to kill baby Krishna, so...
Well, intention was bad, but the action was good.
This was...
Yeah. Maybe I said it wrong, I'm not sure. But the intention was bad, obviously, because she was trying to kill Krishna. But the action was good because she was doing it in the sense like a mother offering her breast milk. Yeah. So Krishna just saw the good action, not the bad intention.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Krishna Kirtana.
That phrase that you quoted, Bhagavad Janana, is that basically what that means?
Yes.
Krishna only takes the good part of it?
He only sees the essence, the devotional essence of our activity and disregards everything else.
Normally when we talk about progressive Krishna consciousness, we often use spiritual bank account and you don't quite finish this lifetime and we carry on to ultimately become perfect. Srila Prabhupada's purpose is something very interesting, which I haven't really heard him say before. He says, those that completely, fully devote their love of Krishna go to Goloka. Those who partially, by accident or by association, get a little hint of it, they go to Vaikuntha. So, can you comment on that?
Oh yes, Prabhupada's been very liberal. In that sense that, once we take up spiritual life, whether it's in this lifetime or future lifetimes, as long as you continue on that path, birth after birth, you'll progress more and more. So, I think he's using this example particularly in respect to the Battle of Kurukshetra, that he wanted to relieve the burden of the earth in response to Bhumi's plea. So everybody who on that battlefield gave up their body because Krishna was personally present. So Prabhupada mentions even those who had just that little appreciation for Krishna, they were awarded that liberation to Vaikuntha. And, when mentioned at the end of the purport, Prabhupada is saying, Uddhava seemingly lamented that his own position was less than the warriors, because he was still stuck here, feeling so much separation for Krishna. So, as we know, everybody on the battlefield of Kurukshetra was liberated because Krishna was personally present. But I guess Prabhupada has been liberal in that sense. But the point you're making that, it's a result of many lives of practicing devotional service where we get the opportunity, whether it's to Vaikuntha or Goloka Vrindavan. But I think particularly Prabhupada's using that point on the battlefield of etc. Does that sound reasonable? Yes, Rupa.
Couple of questions. One is obviously on the Pandavas side, apart from the 5 Pandavas, there must have been many other warriors who had full love for Krishna and achieved not just Vaikuntha but Goloka. What about on the Kauravas side? Is there any understanding that, like Vishnu was, due to circumstance, he was on the Kaurava side, that he had pure love for Krishna? So is there any understanding that maybe there was other soldiers on the Kaurava side who would have achieved Goloka, not just Vaikuntha?
Yeah, well, Prabhupada clarifies that those who had developed love of Krishna, they achieve Goloka Vrindavan, but everybody else is the Vaikunthas. So he doesn't specify who went where, but he just makes the point. I mean, regardless whose side you're fighting on, if there's love of God, Krishna reciprocates in that way. But he's saying even those who have developed just a very small appreciation, even those achieve Vaikuntha. So whether it was on Pandava or Kaurava side, I think those guidelines would apply.
The second question is, Prabhu was talking about how the soldiers that Arjuna killed, first they got purified by his arrows, transcendental arrows, but did it work the same way with the Kauravas killing the Pandavas? Because their arrows weren't transcendental like Arjuna, but did they have the same effect on killing the Pandavas? They got purified first?
Well, everybody went to Vaikuntha, so in the end, everybody went to the same place. I think Prabhupada's just using that, Arjuna is Krishna's representative, so they're purified by his arrows. But ultimately, because Krishna was there, they all went back to Vaikuntha at least. So that's all I could say on that point. Otherwise I'd be speculating. But Krishna, he, yes, Vaishnavi.
To the class, we were talking about Putana. I just remembered when Vanu Swami came, he said that Putana, even though she got the position as a nursemaid for mother of Krishna and Goloka, it was a very distant relationship. So
It was a very
distant relationship.
distant, yes.
It's just like in a classroom. It's not just one size fits all. They all have the same equal opportunity. They all can achieve the same destination. But then it depends on their desire and degree of surrender.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, that's well understood that everybody has, there's so many different gradations. It's not black and white. Like Madhavendra Puri, his original position in the spiritual world is a Kalpavriksha tree. So you could say, well, that's pretty distant. He's a great devotee, but his benediction was so many of Krishna's pastimes were taking place underneath him, under that tree. So he was able to, he knew so many pastimes because it was going on right by him, sort of thing. So whether one is in a distant relationship in Goloka Vrindavan or very intimate relationship, Goloka Vrindavan is Goloka Vrindavan. So, But according, Krishna reciprocates according to one's desire, so she's perfectly situated according to, her desires. So, Krishna, he reciprocates in so many ways and makes so many different arrangements. Just one story, I think it was back in the 90s, Vijay Prabhu, the book distributor minister, he put on one chat that I think it was in Romania. It was like after communism, but it was still a bit of a heavy mood on the streets. There was still a bit of, secret police sort of stuff happening. Anyway, this devotee was distributing books on the street, and and he noticed that these suspicious looking persons were looking at him and coming towards him, and he said, I bet these are secret police, you know, they want to harass me or arrest me or take my books or something. So he immediately picked up his books and started running, and they started running after him, so, you know, here and there through the city, and eventually went down a little alleyway, and it was a dead end. And I thought, oh, what do I do now? And, you know, these secret police are running down, stop, you're under arrest. And then he noticed a doorway just by his side, and he turned it and it was open. So he jumped in and closed it and locked it. And you know, the others were banging on. But anyway, he was in this building, very dark and, you know, cavernous sort of hall. And stairs, passageways, and all of a sudden he comes out onto a stage, a lit stage. And a man was talking on the microphone, and the whole hall was full of people. And the man says, "Oh, we've been waiting for you. You've got the gifts with you." And the devotee had no idea what was going on, but he just saw that Krishna gave him intelligence to play along with it. So, I've got them here. And the man took the book bag and said, "How much do we owe you?" And he just gave up a figure, it was so many dollars, whatever, and the man wrote out a check, and he started giving the books out to everybody in the hall. So ended up that this was a meeting of butchers. It was a butchers' convention. And everybody was getting Prabhupada's books, and, you know, I mean, only Krishna could arrange such a thing, you know. So, so this is like Arjuna arrows, you know, Arjuna is throwing arrows everywhere, so Krishna arranged that these books go everywhere, just to purify everybody. We're finished now, sorry. Okay, thank you very much, Prabhupada. Ki Jai.